Good afternoon then. We will make a start now. Welcome to this meeting of the Royal Statistical Society's Professional Statisticians Forum. My name is Trevor Lewis and I will be giving the presentation today entitled CStat Revalidation, Your Questions Answered. I'm a member of the Professional Affairs Committee of the RSS, which is the committee responsible for professional matters and as such is responsible for the implementation of the CStat revalidation process. And like all members of the Professional Affairs Committee, I'm a chartered statistician and I'm also a chartered scientist. My career as a statistician has included 8 years in academia, 22 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and most recently 12 years working as an independent statistical consultant. Okay, so let's make a start. So welcome to this presentation on Chartered Statistician Revalidated, which aims to pull together information on the revalidation process, and in doing so, hopefully answer any questions you may have about the process in general and how it affects you in particular. In this presentation, I will try to cover the questions that have already been raised by those participating in the revalidation process this year. So moving to slide 2, the outline of the presentation is shown on this slide. We will start with an overview of CStat revalidation. You may recall we announced the introduction of revalidation at the beginning of 2012, and so there was a need to transition the existing CStat holders into the process, and so we'll say a little about that transition. We will then summarize the outcome for the first 2 cohorts to go through the revalidation process in 2014 and 2015. We will then go into some detail on the revalidation process being adopted in 2016 for the cohort who have a revalidation date of the 1st of January 2017, referred to as the 3rd cohort on the slides. Revalidation is based largely on continuing professional development, so we will then say a little about the recording and scope of CPD, and this is the aspect about which most questions are raised. And finally, we will cover the support materials that are available to help you with maintaining a record of your CPD, ensuring that your CPD is supportive to your career development and ensuring that you understand the requirements for revalidation. So moving to slide 3 then, in order to give an overview of the CStat revalidation process, we will cover the following 5 questions. What is revalidation? Who needs to undertake revalidation? Why did we introduce revalidation for CStat? What is the basis of revalidation? And how does the 5-year cycle operate? So moving to slide 4, what is revalidation? Revalidation is the process to be successfully completed in order to retain CStat professionally active status. Sometimes such a process is referred to as renewal or reaccreditation, but the RSS chose the term revalidation. The aim is to confirm maintenance of professional standards by a combination of declaration and providing evidence. Revalidation is a form of professional appraisal carried out by the Society. In this respect, you may want to compare it with the performance appraisal carried out by an employer. The focus of revalidation is professionalism in your working life, whereas the focus of an employer's performance appraisal is the achievement of goals and the development of skills and knowledge in support of goal delivery. And by professionalism, we're focusing on being trustworthy, ethical, up-to-date and competent, which is a shorthand for the approach to professional life which is codified in the Society's Code of Conduct. On slide 5, we just clarify who needs to undertake revalidation. It is the professionally active chartered statistician. So let's say a little about the exceptions. We first of all should note that those chartered statisticians who also hold the Chartered Scientist Award undertake the Science Council's annual revalidation process rather than the Chartered Statistician revalidation process. And successful completion of the Science Council's process, which is administered by the RSS, serves the needs for maintaining both CSI and CStat awards. Moving to the second bullet on the slide, for those on a career break or with extenuating circumstances during the 5-year cycle, revalidation may be deferred. Each case is treated on its merits, but in general, deferment may be the best course of action if the career break or extenuating circumstances cover a period including the 4th or 5th year of the 5-year cycle. For those permanently retired or those who have had a permanent change of career away from statistics, there is no need to undertake revalidation in order to retain CStat status, although in this case the professional register will indicate that you are no longer professionally active. And finally, those professionally qualified fellows who retained the professional qualifications of the Institute of Statisticians, the MIS and FIS, at the time of the merger with the Royal Statistical Society in 1993, they do not need to undertake revalidation to retain the MIS and FIS awards. On slide 6, we cover why we introduced revalidation in 2012. Fundamentally, it was a key part of our strategy to raise the status and value of the award, both for those holding the award and to the beneficiaries of their work, be they employers, clients, funders, etc. Specifically, revalidation increases the credibility of CStat as a professional award, as it says something about your capability today rather than at the time you originally received the award. This view was expressed in a number of discussions held with employers. It also reflects trends in continuing professional development policy of professional bodies, with a move from policies that were voluntary to mandated approaches that are monitored. And recall that the CPD policy of the Society has been mandatory for professionally qualified fellows since its introduction in 2004. So revalidation is introducing monitoring of an existing mandated policy. And finally, our experience with the Chartered Scientist revalidation process as a licensed body of the Science Council confirmed in our minds the benefits of such a process and our ability to manage an efficient and effective process for our members. Slide 7 indicates that the basis of revalidation process is adherence to the Code of Conduct and compliance with the CPD policy, the former being confirmed primarily by declaration, whereas we will ask for evidence for the latter. So the Code of Conduct was put in place in 1993 and has been mandated for chartered statisticians since that date, and it was revised again in 2014. There is a phrase in the original Code of Conduct which states, fellows shall seek to upgrade their professional knowledge and skill and shall maintain awareness of technological developments, procedures and standards which are relevant to their field. This was expanded upon by the CPD policy, which was introduced in 2004 and revised in 2009. And we will come back to say more about the CPD policy later in the presentation. Slide 8 shows a schematic of the 5-year cycle. The expectation is that in compliance with the CPD policy, chartered statisticians will prepare a CPD summary in each year. For most members, that CPD summary will serve multiple purposes. As well as satisfying the requirements of the CPD policy of the Society, and hence their revalidation needs, it will also serve to support their employers' appraisal process and be part of their up-to-date CV and professional profile, and also support their development and career planning. Although you will prepare a CPD summary for each year, you should not submit anything to the Society until you receive a request at the beginning of year 5. Moving to slide 9, you will see a breakdown of the activities in year 5. A point to emphasize is that this does not represent a year of activity by chartered statisticians. Much of the time is free elapsed time or for administrative and assessment activities undertaken by professional affairs staff and volunteers at the Society. So going through the steps on the slide then from left to right, in January of year 5, you'll receive an email outlining the revalidation process. By the end of March, all chartered statisticians for which this is year 5 will need to make their initial submission, which will include making a declaration and providing basic information. For most, this will be all they need to submit. Feedback on this submission will be provided in April, including an indication of whether you've been selected for audit. The selection of members for audit will be based on a risk-based sampling approach, which I'll say a little bit about in a moment. We may vary the percentage selected for audit, and in previous years we have been selecting somewhere between 10 and 15%. Those selected for audit will be notified in April and will be required to make their audit submission in June. The panel of assessors will meet over the summer and provide feedback by early September. So let me say a little bit more about risk-based sampling. I think the point to make here is that, like many professional bodies, if we were not resource limited, then we would ask for the audit type information for everyone. So that is the, if you like, the full information that one might require to assess compliance with the CPD policy of the Society. But like most professional bodies, we are resource limited, and so we use this sampling approach. And the way we look at selecting the sample is the following, that if your initial submission gives explicit information confirming compliance with the CPD policy of the Society, then we are less likely to select you for audit. If it does not, then we're more likely to select you for audit. And I'll say a little bit more about that confirmation of compliance with the CPD policy as I go through the slides, the later slides, which are focused more on the CPD policy rather than the revalidation process itself. So these last 5 or 6 slides hopefully have given an overview of the general CStat revalidation process. And we'll now briefly explain the transition into this process following its introduction at the beginning of 2012. Slide 10 describes this transition. So those members who received their CStat awards prior to 2012 were split into 3 cohorts represented by the top 3 panels on this slide. The first going through revalidation process in 2014 based on their CPD summaries for the calendar years 2012 and 13. The second going through the revalidation process in 2015 based on CPD summaries from the calendar years 2012 through to 2014. and the third, that is this year's revalidation process, based on CPD summaries from the calendar years 2012 to 2015. Those awarded their CStat during 2012 had 2012 as their year zero, an opportunity to make sure that they were aware of what was needed to comply with the Code of Conduct and the CPD policy, and so started their cycle in 2013, undertaking Year 5 revalidation process in 2017, and so they're represented by the fourth panel on this slide. And those awarded CStat in 2013 will undergo their revalidation process in 2018. They have a revalidation date of the 1st of January 2019. So that's the final panel here. Now, as we move forward in years, say, as we go into, say, those who entered in 2014, those members join the first cohort on this slide who successfully revalidated in 2014 and undergo revalidation again in 2019. And so on for those who entered in 2015 and 2016. They'll join the second and third cohorts. Now we will move on to a series of slides reporting the outcome of the revalidation in the first 2 years, just to give you a feel of how the processes run to date. So on slide 11, you will see the number of professionally active chartered statisticians in the first and second cohorts undergoing revalidation in 2014 and 2015. Note that for now, we are discussing the processes undertaken by those not also holding this Chartered Scientist Award, and I'll mention the Chartered Scientist in a later slide. The first row of this table indicates the number of professionally active CStats in the cohorts undergoing revalidation. And this information is taken from the professional register in January, and so captures numbers prior to the completion of the membership renewal process and the payment of subscriptions. So from the second row in the table, you will see that 6 to 8% of members chose not to renew, and in the subsequent table, it is the number in the final row of the table that is taken as the cohort size. So 175 in 2014 and 221 in 2015. And it should be noticed that the introduction of revalidation has not led to an increase in the number of CStats defaulting at this stage. You'll see as a footnote to the slide the situation in 2013, where again 6% of CStats defaulted, that is, failed to pay their subscription by mid-April. Okay, so moving on to slide 12, this slide shows the outcome of the revalidation processes in 2014 and 2015. There's quite a lot of information on this slide, so let me take it row by row. The first row shows that in each year, about 65% fully satisfy the revalidation requirements. The second row indicates that a number partially satisfied the requirements, and the third row indicates the number for whom revalidation was deferred for 1 year due to extenuating circumstances. Thus, the first 3 rows indicate that in 2014, 76% continued as professionally active CStats, and in 2015, 69% continued as professionally active chartered statisticians. Now, the next 2 rows indicate those who retain CStat status, but for whom their professional register entry indicated that they were not professionally active as statisticians. A temporary state for those on a career break, but typically permanent for those undertaking a career change or moving into retirement. From the final row in the table, it can be seen that about 15% each year fail revalidation, primarily because they failed to respond to multiple communications by email and letter. But also some do contact us to indicate that they do not wish to continue to be chartered. So these figures include the outcome for everyone, including those selected for audit. Now, slide 13 summarises the outcome of the audit process in both 2014 and 2015. And the number selected for audit was about 10% of those eligible. Those fully satisfying the audit requirements include members who were asked to provide additional information before a final assessment was made by the panel. Those partially meeting the requirements were given feedback on improvement areas and also why they were not revalidated for a full 5-year period. We tried to be supportive in the revalidation process, and for 2 members, it became apparent during the audit process that it would be better to defer their revalidation due to a career break in one case and extenuating circumstances in the other case. Those indicated as failing declined to provide the requested information. So, moving into slide 14 then, I have tried to pull together the overall information, including both those charter statisticians going through the CStat revalidation process and those going through the annual chartered scientist revalidation process. So about 200 in number go through the CSI process each year. And recall that charter statisticians who also hold both awards, CStat and CSI, satisfying the requirements of the CSI process serves the revalidation requirements for both awards. So you will see that overall, in each of the last 2 years, about 400 charter statisticians have undergone revalidation each year. Around 85% remain as professionally active CStats, and about 7.5% switch to not professionally active, and 7.5% cease to retain chartered status. So this year, about 300 will undertake the CStat revalidation process, and 200 the CSI revalidation process, which makes about 500 revalidating in total. So that, if you like, concludes the summary of what's happened in previous years. So now let's move on to focus on the specifics of the revalidation process for this year for the cohort who have a revalidation date of the 1st of January 2017. So slide 15 shows the date of the email sent to initiate the revalidation process, the 18th of January, and the date by which the initial submission needs to be received. That's the 31st of March. And for the vast majority of those in this cohort, this initial submission will complete the process. For those selected for audit, though, they will be notified in April, and the final date for the audit submission to be received will be the 30th of June. So first let's take a look at the initial submission, which would have been described in the letter that would have been received in mid-January. So slide 16 briefly describes the 3 options that members were asked to choose from in their initial submission. So these were the 3 options given in the email sent out in the middle of January. So if you choose option A, you make a declaration and return a CPD summary for the calendar year 2015. If you choose option B, it is indicating that you wish to continue to hold the CStat award, but cannot make the declaration in option A. Usually that's because you're not at the moment professionally active because of a career break, extenuating circumstances, career change, or retirement. And option C is an indication that you do not wish to revalidate. So let's look in more detail at each of these options. So this is really just recapping the information that was in the email that was sent out. Slide 17 describes option A. And there are three parts to this option. So let me go through those three parts. I would like to revalidate and continue to hold the Chartered Statistician Award from the 1st of January 2017 until my next revalidation date. And then there is the declaration. I affirm that I will continue to be professionally active, comply with the RSS CPD policy, and adhere to the RSS Code of Conduct. And if my professional circumstances change such that I am not able to fulfill the above obligations, then I will contact the Society immediately. And the third aspect of option A is that attaching a CPD summary for the calendar year 2015 with your reply. Now, as indicated in the email, it's important to remember to label your summary with your surname and your membership number so that it can be readily identified as yours. Remember, we'll be dealing with some 300 CPD summaries in this process. Now, as indicated on the slide, if you select this option, you may be selected for audit and be required to submit further information about your professional experience and development over the period from 2012 to 2015, and you'll be notified about that during April. Moving on to the next slide, this describes option B. This is slide 18. So what is option B? I wish to continue to hold my Chartered Statistician Award, however, due to a career break, extenuating circumstances, a career change or retirement, I am unable to make the declaration described in option A. So as indicated on the slide, if you select this option, we ask you to provide a brief explanation of your circumstances. And note that the guidance allows the Society the discretion to defer revalidation for up to 3 years in cases of career breaks or extenuating circumstances. And in the case of permanent career change or retirement from professional activity, your Chartered Statistician status can be retained, and revalidation is no longer required. And in this case, your status on the professional register will be indicating that you're no longer professionally active as a statistician. Maybe at this point I should try and just clarify what is meant by retirement. It means that you cease to be professionally active and so let me say a little bit more about that. So if you are performing a role that requires you to keep your knowledge and competence up to date, then you would not be considered retired. It does not need to be a full-time or paid work, and so members who are engaged in volunteering, outreach or consultancy, for example, should consider themselves as professionally active and undertake relevant CPD. In contrast, someone who is reading journals and attending lectures out of personal interest, but is no longer actively contributing to the profession, either through paid employment or volunteering of some kind, they would not be considered professionally active and so would fall into the retired category. Okay, so maybe at the end of the presentation we can have a further discussion about that because it tends to be a topic which does need clarification. Okay, slide 19 describes option C and is as indicated on this slide. This is the option where you're indicating that you do not wish to revalidate and so you do not wish to continue to hold the Chartered Statistician Award beyond the end of the year. And we do ask that if you select this option, you provide the Society with your primary reason for the decision. Just a brief comment is required. Our experience from the revalidation process in previous years is that a small number of members select this option because of a misunderstanding of the revalidation requirements. And we're keen to make sure that only members that members only choose this option, fully understanding the other options that are available. So in summary, then, thinking about the last three slides, we require an option choice A, B or C to be made by the 31st of March. Unfortunately, if no response is received, we will have to assume option C has been selected. So let's now return to what happens next in the revalidation process. That's after the initial submission has been made. So slide 20 is a repeat of a previous slide, and it just shows you the various steps, and we're going to focus now on this phase where we've got to April, and we're in the April through to the end of the year phase. So in April, we will assess the CPD returns from those who have selected option A. The feedback we will provide initially will be overall feedback on the quality of the set of CPD submissions that we have received. And once you have received this general feedback, if you would like specific feedback on your submission, just let us know. We will also let you know whether or not you've been selected for audit, and if you have been selected, guidance on what you need to do. If you have selected option B, we will confirm receipt in April, if not before, and indicate our response to your explanation of your circumstances. If you have indicated that you are on a career break or have extenuating circumstances, we will recommend an approach to possible deferment of your revalidation. And as mentioned earlier, deferment is likely to be recommended course of action if your career break or extenuating circumstances are recent or current. If you have indicated that you are now permanently retired or have permanently moved away from a career in statistics, we will confirm receipt and update the professional register to reflect the fact that you are retired or had a career change and so are not professionally active as a statistician. If you have selected option C, we will confirm receipt and confirm that your CStat status will cease at the end of the year. We will also clarify the possibility of reapplying for CStat status in the future. So if you were not selected for audit, the process completes for you at this point, and if you have chosen option A, your revalidation date would normally be reset to the 1st of January 2022. And so your next revalidation year 5 process would be in 2021. Okay, so let's say a little bit more about the audit process in detail then. And so looking now at slide 21, this indicates the information that is requested from those selected for audit. So the aim here is to collect information about your CPD activities over the calendar years 2012 to 2015, or a subset of these years, to ensure that your program of CPD is in line with the expectations of the Society's CPD policy. And it's really having assessed the quality, overall quality of the initial submissions, that we will choose whether we restrict this to a subset of the years. And I should say that in the past couple of years we've restricted it to 1 or 2 years because the quality of the submissions has been very high on that initial submission of a CPD summary. So looking at this slide then, if we look at the top left panel, in particular we're concerned to confirm that the CPD that you have undertaken is aligned with the needs of your current job role and or your career aspirations. So we ask for a career summary for the relevant period. So for most people this is just an extract from their CV. If you look at the bottom left panel, we also ask for you to reflect on how your program of CPD activities overall have supported the development of relevant skills, knowledge and experience, and how it has helped you to deliver to the customers of your services. So these customers might be project teams that you work in, clients that you do consultancy for, students whose research you support or who you teach, colleagues that you supervise or mentor, etc., etc. The bottom right panel indicates that we also ask for a list of supporting information that could be provided to clarify or confirm the information that you have given. So we don't ask you to provide this information, just list what could be provided if needed. The question of confidentiality often arises. The information that you provide will be treated in the strictest confidence, and even for people working with confidential information in government or commercially confidential information in the private sector, we have found ways to overcome these concerns. We also provide the option for you to give a referee who is able to confirm your information rather than providing the assessment panel with access to confidential reports. Now, rather than giving this information in free format, where you might not be sure about how much information we require in each area, we actually provide you with a revalidation form template. And the next slide, that is slide 22, we mention the revalidation form on which we expect you to provide the information. So, as I've just said, using this template enables you to provide the information in a way that is efficient and useful for you, and also for the panel of assessors. The form has 7 sections, and on the previous slide I've talked about most of those sections. The only one I have not talked about so far is the section on development planning. This is included simply to encourage you to be thinking ahead about your future development needs. And note that the revalidation form described on this slide is already available to download from the web page given at the top of this slide. So to reiterate, if selected for audit, the audit submission will need to be provided by the end of June, and the panel of assessors will provide feedback by early September. Okay, I'm going to skip over the next slide and move on to slide 24. So now we're moving into talking about recording of CPD. So this is where I'm moving into talking a lot about continuing professional development and how to record it and how the RSS views the scope of CPD. So slide 24 then is intended to do 2 things. First of all, to emphasize that the Society is quite happy for you to record your CPD in whatever way is most convenient for you, and to also point out the requirements of the CPD policy of the Society. So this is coming back to the point I made earlier about what we're looking for in your initial CPD submission. So let's first of all, though, talk about the left-hand panel in this slide. So we're quite happy for you to use any method or system to record your CPD. So some people have their own personal approach, and typically it's an Excel spreadsheet in which they collect the relevant information, and that's just fine. Other people use either their employer's approach or an adaptation of their employer's approach. The RSS do provide 2 approaches. One is the online CPD system, which can be accessed through My RSS or through the CPD web page on the website. And there is also an MS Word template that many people use as well, that's also provided on the website, and I'll give you the web address for that in a later slide. And so what we actually find in practice is that about 1/3 of the people use the RSS template, about 1/3 use the RSS online system, and about 1/3 use a personal or employer format for the CPD submission that they make. So what are we specifically looking for in the CPD submission? We're looking for compliance with the CPD policy, and there are three aspects that we particularly focus on. That the activities that you've undertaken cover at least 3 of the 5 categories of activity defined in the CPD policy. That you've undertaken at least 60 learning hours of activity. And remember that learning hours are different from elapsed hours, and if you're not sure of the difference, then later on I'll give a reference where you might want to read a little bit more about that. And we're also looking for reflection on the activities undertaken. That is an assessment of outcome and benefit. So these are the things we're specifically looking for. So if you provide a thoughtful summary which includes these things, then you're much less likely to be selected for audit than if you don't cover these points. Okay, so that's dealing with recording. Let's talk a little bit more then on slide 25 about the scope of CPD. Now, the main point I want to make here is that CPD is not restricted to the development of technical skills and knowledge. Typically, you need a broader set of knowledge and skills than just technical in order to ensure your input is relevant, makes an impact, and is effective. Of course, though technical skills do provide a very important foundation, but there are other things as well that you might do in order to be effective in a professional statistician role. So to be relevant, you need a knowledge of the context in which you are working. This context knowledge involves any legal or regulatory framework that affects the sector in which you are working, any standards that are established by your sector or employer for how work gets done. In addition, it involves gaining and maintaining a knowledge of the business setting in which you are working, whether it is the business of education, the business of government, the business of pharmaceutical R&D, the business of market research, the business of manufacturing automobiles, the business of operating as an independent statistical consultant. To make an impact, you also need interpersonal skills to effectively communicate with co-workers and deliver your technical contribution. Many statisticians work in multidisciplinary teams, and in this context, your team working and leadership skills are valuable to ensure that the team as a whole delivers, and that your statistical contribution enhances team performance and the quality of team and the team output. Finally, depending on the size and nature of the organization you work in, there will be processes in place to support people and deliver tasks. Knowledge of these processes and the skills to manage, facilitate, or operate within them can greatly increase the effectiveness of the contribution you make. So CPD covers developing and maintaining knowledge, skills, and experience in all of these areas. And so when we look at your CPD summary, we would quite expect to see maybe contributions from any or all of these areas. Okay, I will skip over slide 26 and move on to slide 27. On slide 27 are the categories that are recommended in the RSS CPD policy. Now, in the appendix of the CPD policy, there is a definition of each category and a series of examples of the activities. And I don't propose in the current presentation to go through those definitions and examples. You can read them at your leisure in the CPD policy. I would stress, though, that the principal value of the categorization is to demonstrate a broad range of activities that can be used to support your professional development. And there's two specific points to make here. Firstly, formal training sessions do contribute towards your CPD, but they are by no means the only way of doing so, and will typically make only a minor contribution towards your overall CPD program. And secondly, do not forget about the major contribution that work-based learning can make towards your CPD. Some people incorrectly totally ignore this category of learning, whereas others incorrectly, again, list all the activities that appear in their job description. Typically, it is the case that many activities in your job role do have a learning component, and it is legitimate to count these in your CPD summary. However, it is only a proportion of the time you spend on these activities that typically has a learning value, hence the concept of learning hours described in the CPD policy of the Society. It is worth saying here that it is possible to make the case for a particular activity falling in more than one category. So don't get hung up on the categorization. Just allocate an activity to a category you can justify. The key point is that you should be thinking of using the full range of activities and opportunities available to you to support your professional development. Okay then. So moving on to slide 28 and indeed slide 29 as well. Here I've given some examples of material that is on the RSS website in support of the revalidation process. And I'll just talk through these step by step. You'll see there's links to the appropriate web page attached to each of these items. So I guess the first thing to mention is that there are revalidation web pages on the RSS website, one for the CStat process, which is the one I've concentrated on today. There's also one for the Chartered Scientist revalidation process. Which, remember, the fundamental difference between the two processes is that the CStat process is a 5-yearly cycle, whereas the CSI process is an annual cycle. I've also mentioned during the presentation the code of conduct, and of course that features in the declaration that's made if you wish to continue to be a professionally active chartered statistician, and the link to have a look at the code of conduct is given there. The CPD policy is something I've mentioned on many of the slides, and that policy, and there is a report which gives some additional guidance which you might want to look at as well, and that's on the CPD webpage. That webpage also has a video demonstrating the use of the RSS Online CPD system. If you've not previously used it and want to start using it, then you might want to look at that video. The only comment I would make about the video, it was put in place prior to the update of the RSS website. So the little bit at the beginning about how to get onto the online system is a little out of date, but from getting onto the online system, then all the rest of the information is relevant. So just to reiterate, to get to the online system these days, all you have to do is to go into My RSS and click on CPD, and you're there. There is an RSS CPD activity summary for recording CPD. Remember, as well as the online system, there is this MS Word template, which can be downloaded from the web page mentioned there, which is the CPD Profiles web page. So moving on to slide 29, a few more support pieces of information on the website. On that CPD Profiles web page, there are 16 exemplars of CPD summaries that have been submitted actually as part of the CSI revalidation process. But they're, I think, relevant to look at because they'll give you a sense of how much information is required. If you want to know a little bit more about continuing professional development than I've mentioned today, there are some slides and extensive notes from a previous Professional Statisticians Forum session on the PSF webpage. It's actually on the past events subpage, click on the past events at the bottom of the page, and you'll be able to find that. The slides themselves are not particularly helpful, but the extensive notes are, I think, so you might want to have a look there. There is a brochure that the Society produced some time ago to talk about CPD opportunities that you might undertake on behalf of the RSS, participating in RSS activities. And then finally, if you still have outstanding questions, having looked at all of that material, then by all means contact us by email at pac@rss.org.uk with any other questions. So a final concluding slide then, slide 30. Just in summary, revalidation is a professional appraisal process introduced with the objective of raising the value of the CStat award. It is intended to be a supportive process to encourage good professional practice. The intention is to minimize extra work required from those who are managing their profession, their career progression as a professional statistician. So we try to only ask for information that we feel you might normally have to hand. It's a two-stage process, an initial submission by all and additional information requested from a sample selected for audit. And if in doubt, contact us for clarification and support at the email address given there. Okay, so let me then start by answering the first question, which was submitted by Tim Davis, and again I'll read the question because those who are on the phone line will not obviously be able to see the questions. So Tim asks, I'm puzzled why I only had to provide CPD evidence for 2015 and not for the previous 5 years. Well, I guess it's all part of this having a two-stage process which manages the resource commitment of the Society. So for this first stage, we are looking for a strong indication, if you like, that members are following the CPD policy of the Society, and for that purpose we feel we need to only ask for a 1 year summary. So what would our reaction would be, I think, if we found that the CPD summaries were typically not of high quality, then in subsequent years we might be asking at this stage for 2 or 3 years worth. I guess in order to make sure that we are getting a good reflection of high quality compliance with the CPD policy of the Society. As I mentioned, in the first 2 years, the CPD summaries that we found in the initial stage, and which we found through the audit process, both of the CStat and CSI revalidation processes, have been of really high quality. So we're quite confident that chartered statisticians are typically complying with the CPD policy. And all of that builds into why we only ask for the 1 year for the initial submission. We will close the meeting at this point. I'd like to thank you for joining the session. If you want to recap on any of the information that we've covered today, then there will be a webcast of the meeting which will be posted within a week. So again, look on the PSF webpage for that webcast. And indeed, if you have colleagues who were unable to join today, you might make them aware of that webcast for them to take a look at, and hopefully they'll find the presentation. So thank you very much for joining the meeting, and hopefully we will have you along at a future PSF meeting. Thank you.